Welcome to the Homeschool New York Podcast, your support at the kitchen table and advocacy in the world. I'm your host, Emily Hutchinson, and I'm joined today by our Homeschool New York LEA President, Robin Jen Snyder, and our Secretary, Dan DeFrancesco. Thank you all so much for being here today.
It's a pleasure.
It's our pleasure.
So Robin, Jen, I'd like to do a little Meet the President. So if you guys could just share a little bit about yourselves, your homeschool journey, and then how you came to leadership within Homeschool New York.
Sure.
So Rob and I met involved in InterVarsity Fellowship in college. And that was actually my first exposure to homeschooling in any way, shape, or form. The college advisor for Rob's group was homeschooling their 3 young children. And the first time Rob told me that, I put my hands on my hips and said, "Oh, that's ridiculous. Why would anybody do that? That's just, too far. I went to public school. I was fine, So I was 17 years old at the time. I was full of all that wisdom. And then fast forward almost 3 years later, we were married. And then 5 years after that, we had our first child, Kyle. And by the time he was ready to go to kindergarten, we were like, public school, no way, no how. We were looking into Christian education and found a church-based Christian school nearby with friends that we already knew who were there and felt pretty good about it. And by that time, we'd also had Ryan, our second oldest, and they were 2 years apart. And school was an interesting experience for my boys. Turns out my oldest really was not well suited for the classroom and all those rules and, no running at recess, go to figure. And then my younger one was just really able to do schoolwork way above his grade level and just needed to be more challenged, and came into 2nd and 4th grade, and we realized that we had to make a change for our family, and still really was not feeling entirely called to homeschool, although by now we'd been more exposed to it and had seen the benefits of it, or at least heard about the benefits of it. But I was afraid to take the first step because I just felt like I wasn't disciplined enough, organized enough. I certainly knew that I could teach subjects, but I just kind of felt like I don't have enough hours in the day to do what I'm doing now. How could I add that on? But my husband was a gentle encourager, and he was able to, without, inciting me, find holes in my calendar, places where I was already serving at school, and realizing that those hours would now turn into time at home. And so that worry about, having too much on my plate and fitting it all in was probably not as valid as I thought it was. And then we just came to a point where we were looking for another school for our boys, and came to realize that it really wasn't the private public debate that we should be having, but it was rather the school versus being at home debate. School just was not a good fit for either of our boys, and there were no good options otherwise. And then right around that time, we found out we were pregnant with our 3rd child, Abby, and just could not picture trying to juggle driving back and forth to school and all those activities and everything with a newborn, and kind of took that step of faith to bring the kids home. And we never looked back. It was the best thing that happened to our family, the relationships between the kids. 4 years later, we had our youngest, Amanda. So we ended up homeschooling 4 kids, and we are now in our last year.
Yep, 21 years in on homeschooling. Who would have thought back in the day, right? And about halfway through that time, we were just like, homeschooling. We were a member of a local chapter of Homeschool New York, New York State Loving Education at Home. And, and it started hearing little rumorings and stuff like that of opportunities to do something larger, to be able to serve on a bigger scale. And one thing led to another, and we ended up joining the state leadership and to help with some IT things. That's my skill background and stuff. So we're doing some tech work on that side of things, and had an opportunity to take on local leadership in our chapter at the same time. And then just through God's grace and timing of things, moved through did a stint as board secretary, and then we've been serving as president now for a number of years
since 2019.
Yep, and really thoroughly enjoyed that. And it is kind of funny because it's like we're sort of like the singular president in a sense, because we kind of both treat the thing as the same, and we work together on that. And it's been a real joy to serve together in a shared ministry this way. But very, very passionate about homeschooling and the rights for families to be able to do this in their home with their own choices, and the government not bothering them and other people not bothering them to do their thing. And it's just been one of the great joys of our life to be able to serve this organization this way.
Thank you for sharing that. And yeah, that's one thing I really appreciate about your leadership is you really do serve as a team so well. You're so well suited. And so I really appreciate that. And we came on at the same time. I came on as the magazine editor in 2019 also. So same year. And then also became the membership enhancement coordinator a couple of years after that. But all right, Dan, I'd love to do a little meet the secretary. Could you please share a little bit about yourself and how you came to home education and also to Homeschool New York?
Yeah, sure. Thank you very much for the opportunity. Rob and Jen are out in Long Island, but we're on the western side of the state outside of Buffalo. Of course, Emily, you're kind of mid-state, so we're kind of spanning the globe here of New York State with our locations. Um, Married, my wife, Catherine, who really is the homeschool anchor to all the things that we do here. We've been married 42 years, and we have 3 children, and we have 4 grandchildren. And we actually completed our homeschooling practical journey a couple of years ago when our youngest daughter graduated. But we're now seeing that the next generation is on the cusp. Both of our adult children who are married and have children, married folks who had been homeschooled and are looking now to homeschool their own children going forward. So it's generational, it seems, or at least it's starting that way. We really enjoyed the opportunities that homeschooling afforded our family for flexibility, for freedom, for moving at the pace that was appropriate for our kids. And we started into it because really we were looking at educational options. And my wife was very open to the idea of homeschooling. I was admittedly a bit resistant. But then we met some folks at church who were homeschooling and who were doing really well and who we respected, and they gave us great encouragement and confidence that we could do this. And so we moved forward, and it's been excellent for our family. It's been a great blessing, and we've enjoyed it no end. As far as leadership roles, we've been chapter leaders for one of our local chapters here in Western New York for 13 years, and that ended about a year and a half ago. We've been the regional representatives for Western New York for 10 years, and on the state board as secretary for 7 years. And it's really been a great experience to be alongside people, Christian folks, who are like-minded in faith and purpose. And we'll talk a little bit in a moment about purpose and such, but why do you homeschool? It's not necessarily to get away from something. It's because you're really striving for something positive. And it's a great way to not only train up your children and educate them, but also to disciple them. And that's what really motivated us and kept us and keeps us, admittedly, centered on what we're doing here in Homeschool New York.
Thanks
I
for
think that's an
sharing that.
important point because for a lot of people, they're looking to get out of something, and I mean, obviously that was our story too. But we quickly discovered that there was more to draw us into homeschooling and to stay in homeschooling, and all of what Dan just said. It has been, this is why we serve now. This is the calling that we have, is to help people discover that desire to shape and form, to be the primary people who shape and form their children.
Absolutely. It's funny to me to hear of your initial reluctance, Dan and Jen, to homeschooling, because I'm a second generation homeschooler, and it was all I ever knew growing up, and I loved it. I was a Leah kid all the way through, and so I always knew I wanted to homeschool my own children someday. So before I agreed to date my now husband, I said, here's the deal. If we date and if we get married and if we have kids, we're homeschooling. And he didn't know anything about it. He had been Christian and public schooled about half and half, but he was very open to it. And he ended up becoming a public school teacher. And his first day of student teaching, he walked through our apartment door and he said, "We are not sending our kids to public schools." And I was like, "You don't have to tell me twice." And he's still teaching all these years later, and he loves his job. He loves what he does. But we really feel that it's our calling, it's our duty, and also our joy to educate our kids according to Deuteronomy 6. That's when we talk about a lot, that we're teaching our children his ways when we wake up and when we lie down and when we sit down and when we walk by the way. It's all day. So Dan, one of the things I really appreciate about your leadership is just your wisdom and insight and your ability to always bring us back to the main point and why we're here. So that's what I've asked you to share a little bit about today is our vision and mission as an organization.
Yeah, well, I appreciate you saying that. I like to remind myself regularly about the whys. Why am I doing this? Why am I involved in this? Why does it matter? Those sorts of questions. I tend to ask a lot of questions. That's just my nature. But as an organization, recently we had a leadership retreat, and had the privilege of sharing just some thoughts about these concepts of mission and purpose and vision. And those are really fundamental to make sure that we stay on track with what God has called us to do as an organization. Um, and those words sometimes get a little confused, and they do overlap a bit. When you talk about vision, it's a future focused thing. I like to use the definition of vision of what success will look like. If we accomplish what God has shown us, this is what it's going to look like. That's the vision. That's the objective. That's the down the road destination, if you will. And so what is our vision for Homeschool New York is that, we would be able to train up our children and be able to support families that are doing that with the objective of Christian discipleship and education. We don't want our kids not being educated and informed, but we want them to be also trained in character and in godliness. So that's the vision. That's the destination. When we're looking down the road, that's what we want to see. But then you talk about mission, and mission is really, our vocation, and it's more present focused. It's more about what we're about and why we exist, and some of the hows of how we get it done. And so our mission in Homeschool New York is accomplished through local chapters. It's accomplished through statewide activities and events. It's, the Messenger magazine, for example, Emily, that you edit, that helps us accomplish our mission of keeping us present focused, if I could say it that way. Not so much future focused, but present focused. And then I think about the concept of our purpose and, what is our purpose? Our purpose, it's the reason that we're doing it. It's the motivation. It's the clarity. And it's real easy when you're part of an organization like this to get distracted. Oh, this sounds like something that would be really good for us to support or stand alongside. Well, that's true, but we really need to maintain a laser focus on what we've been called to do. I like to say it this way, what is our business? Know that, but also know what is not our business or none of our business. Not that other things aren't valuable and important, but we as an organization need to be very careful to not drift away from the objective that we've been given. So with those kind of thoughts, I shared some things with our leadership team, and I reminded us that, our vision was really established back when we were incorporated back in December of 1990. And I'm looking here at the New York State Division of Corporations and State Records, our certificate of incorporation. And it has a nice New York State seal on it. And it tells us that, we are now approved by the Secretary of State to be a 501c3 entity. And the way that gets approved is you have to state, what are you about? Why are you coming together as an organization or as a company or, a group of some form? And so permit me to just read a couple of lines from the statement, which is in our articles of incorporation. It says the purpose of the corporation is organized and the activities for the furtherance of the gospel of Jesus Christ, first and foremost. The rest of it kind of follows from that. And to foster Christian culture and values by promoting, encouraging, and fostering Christian home education. So it's a reminder that our objective is to exalt Christ and to honor him and to do all things for him. It just so happens that our focus area as an organization is related to home education and to support that because we believe it aligns with God's heart for so many. And so what are some of the specifics in our articles of incorporation? We assist local home education support groups throughout the state. We provide information about the legal climate. We encourage home education across New York State and across the nation. And that's why we're a part of larger national organizations. You might hear a little bit about that in a bit. We interact with the state education department to make sure that we stay on track with the regulations and requirements so that, we don't go astray of what's required of us. We monitor those sort of things. We keep an eye on, when families may be, taken advantage of, or more is expected of them than the regulations require. The last line in this little article says, by doing whatever is necessary to protect the future freedoms of home education in New York and our nation. Those are our marching orders. That's why we exist, and that's what our purpose really is to do whatever is necessary to maintain the freedom that we have to homeschool, because we believe it is a God-given right. So in addition to that, we have other documents in our organization. We have bylaws, which, structure us legally. And it tells in our article that, we are a Christian home education organization, that we believe that every family has the legal and constitutional right to home educate in New York State. And we support that. And yes, we're a Christian organization, but other people in New York that are homeschooling who have other motivations are equally important to us in regard to, we stand together and we want to make sure that all of our freedoms are protected. So that's part of our mission from our bylaws. And then on our website, if you wanted to go there some point, you could read what our purpose is. And I'll just give you a couple of lines of that. Homeschool New York is a statewide organization dedicated to supporting and promoting home education throughout New York State. That's essentially what we do. We're defenders of that freedom, guardians, if you will, to make sure that our rights are protected. And that's why we do advocacy in Albany. That's why we, encourage people to talk to their legislators and get involved in the process. And one of our main purposes is to support the statewide network of local chapters. That's how we're structured, with 90 plus chapters across the state, people meeting in their local communities for the purpose of encouragement and for mutual benefit. And we do that through a lot of means, through advocacy, through information sharing, all kinds of different ways. But that's our purpose, and that's why we exist. And it's really important, I think, for any organization, if you're a community club, or if you're a church, or whatever it might be, a company, to remind yourself regularly why we exist. What are we about? What is our business? And also to keep clear of what isn't really our main focus, so that we're not distracted from the mission that we've been given. So I'm really encouraged, because Homeschool New York has done that over these last 40 plus years. It's really maintained a laser focus on the fact that we're a homeschool organization. We support those things. There are other important issues and concerns that surround that, but we're the advocates for homeschooling, and it's a great joy to be a part of that.
Thank you so much for sharing that. And Rob and Jen, we've seen a lot, especially since COVID, we've seen a lot of new Facebook groups popping up, or homeschool groups on Facebook, I should specify, and other local groups. Could you speak a little bit to the importance of belonging to a statewide organization?
Sure. I think you've got to lump them into two general categories. There's the benefits that you get, and then there's the benefits that you give. Right. I think both are important, particularly as families just start out. You like, what is this homeschooling thing? As both our families talking about our journey, we didn't have any notes to go by. I mean, we were fortunate, like you, Emily, you got to live it growing up, right? We had to kind of figure it out afterwards, and so we needed other families to come alongside us and to encourage us and answer questions and guide us in picking curriculum and just all of those things of going through, and then just to kind of journey together, right? Someone to walk along with. Sometimes we find homeschoolers who are just kind of doing this off in the corner by themselves, and that's just it's better together, right? I mean, just being in fellowship. There's particularly in this day and age with technology, even if there isn't someone right near you, there's other ways to connect and have connection with other homeschooling families who are like-minded. As Dan had mentioned, there's a wide variety of homeschoolers and types of homeschoolers in New York, and people from all kinds of different backgrounds. That's a beautiful thing about how this model works. But finding your group, what's in there. I think our organization provides that in a lot of ways. We have 90 plus chapters across the state, always looking to start more in areas, and some chapters are small and some are larger. But providing that kind of support for people kind of getting off the ground and working through those easy days and those hard days. You need some people to go to when something's like, what do I do? The kids aren't listening, or whatever else is going on. I mean, you need someone to go to, and particularly if you're new, or maybe like maybe the rest of your family or your friends think this is a little bit of a different decision you've made, and perhaps they're not quite as supportive. You need a community to be able to walk with, and so it's important to be part of a local group, but also you can benefit from being part of a larger organization, in this case like ours, with a statewide organization, because we're able to do things on a bigger scale to provide services for you. Emily mentioned briefly before, her other role is membership enhancement coordinator, the hat that she wears for us. And so she literally is there to enhance the benefits to our members. And so she's able to negotiate discounts on curriculum and different opportunities along those lines, and discounts on computers, all manner of things that will bring benefit back to the local families who might not be able to go and solicit and get those kind of things on their own. But by membership with us and affiliation with Homeschool New York, they have access to all kinds of discounts. And it's literally pages of them. Literally, she prints it out, all these different opportunities that folks have. And we can just do that for our families because we're so much of a larger scale. So there can be a tremendous amount, I'm sure I'm missing a few things, but that you can get as, by being part of something larger that way. But in a lot of ways, the thing that folks maybe don't think of as much as what you give. What are you giving back and the value of that? You want to touch on a couple points?
Yeah, well, I think your example, the rise in social media groups where somebody can just pop in and ask a question and, a million people will give an answer. And sometimes none of those answers are the same. And so you're still left going, well, what's the right answer? And I think having the credibility of a state organization who was formed literally at the beginning of when homeschooling became legal in New York. And because of the fact that it was our founding members who were under scrutiny and being threatened with truancy for taking their kids out of school, and really understanding what that battle was about. Like Dan mentioned, we've been really good at staying true to our vision. We've been really good at passing along our history and understanding who those people were and what that fight really was about, and maintaining that level of not becoming complacent over time, and just a school district asks for a piece of information and you just provide it, and maybe people don't even know that it's not required. Sometimes we have a couple of families who get into hot water because they're the only ones in their district saying no to a request, and the district is pressuring them because, well, everybody else gives us this, and we want it. And then, we find out that some, anonymous person in the state education department is telling them that, yes, you can ask for that. And no, because we can go back to our founding and say, no, this was the original intent of how the homeschool regulations were written, what the fight was about and what it was supposed to look like going forward. And we have the documentation to show that because we have our history with us. And I think that's an important part of belonging to somebody who has that continuity from beginning to end, because when that creep happens in regulation or complacency, because we're staying true to our vision, we can call people back to that vision too. And I think that's why it is also important. And I think too, definitions of what's in the regulations get fuzzy along the time, over time. And I think, the best example to me is when homeschooling first became legal in New York. I mean, it was home-based education. And yes, families were getting together and kind of helping each other out, but it was primarily in the home. And now we have a environment where people are outsourcing their education. And I fully believe that parents have the right to do what's best for their child, but you still do have to be within the confines of the regulations. And so what does the state think homeschooling should look like? And the words that they use, I now hear people kind of throwing out this phrase that, well, as long as the parents do 51% of the education, then you're good. And I mean, I know that makes sense logically, but nowhere does it say that in any guidance or anything. And so I think we have to be really careful about what we do support. Like I said, believing in parental rights and that ability to do what's best for your child, but also understanding that we still have to operate within our regulatory framework. And what does that look like? And how can we provide guidance for families that help them do that appropriately?
Yep. That's excellent. And to the point of that kind of advocacy, and as Dan was mentioning with our legislative efforts, when our legislative team is up in Albany talking with senators and assemblymen and dealing with the Board of Regents, who oversees literally everything with education, and you wouldn't believe how many other things in the state of New York, it's one thing to say, okay, I'm just an interested person who's knowledgeable about this, and I'm a homeschooler. It's an entire other thing to say I represent thousands and thousands of families in New York who homeschool. We are the oldest and largest homeschool organization in the state of New York. And I'm telling you, this is what homeschoolers do or believe or want. And we need to be able to say that. I mean, we need thousands and thousands of member families to be able to have that to be true. The enemies of homeschooling freedom right now are a handful of small organizations who do not have anywhere near that kind of membership, but they've got a big voice. There's a lot of yapping going on from them. It's a whole different thing for us to come in and say, we are here, thousands of families in New York, and this is what homeschoolers want. This is what homeschoolers need. This is going to hurt things. This is going to make things better. So what you give when you belong to our organization is that, in part, is that you are adding weight to who we are and to what we can do and what we can say. It also creates a connection between you and folks who are on the forefront of defending, homeschool freedom in the state of New York. When there's something wrong, you're going to hear it from us first, okay? And so we might need people to call, we need people to email, we need people to show up. We've had a number of local issues over the last several years where being able to get a hold of people quickly and being connected to a large number of homeschoolers, large percentage of homeschoolers in a particular area, has allowed us to put boots on the ground and make differences at school board meetings and things like that. And so that's part of what you give. And you may, hopefully most of the time, you don't need to do anything along those lines. But kind of think back to, Revolutionary War, the Minutemen kind of thing. We need families to be ready, and we need them to be connected, to what's going on. So when something happens, if you follow local news, our brothers and sisters homeschooling in Connecticut are in the fight of their lives right now.
At this moment, too.
Literally
actually.
today.
Yep.
Almost as this is being recorded, there is actually a committee meeting going on right now that will decide whether an amendment to a particular larger spending bill is going to get included or not, and that was draconian to homeschool freedom, that particular issue. And so Connecticut has done an amazing job of mobilizing and getting families available and people showing up and doing all the right things. And we're just so grateful for that kind of opportunity for them to be able to step up and do that. But we need the people in New York to be able to be ready to do the same thing. So we need that same kind of connection that people can give their weight to the overall process. So that's a huge part of what you give, and just your support of other families, your encouragement of them. Families have tough days, and being able to be part of that and connected to lifting them up. There's challenges all the way through. I mean, DeFrancesco's and we have homeschooled. We're talking decades here, and it's not just the first couple of years can be a little tough, and everything goes super easy after that. Having that kind of connection that you can support other families along the journey and find like-minded people who know other things, like maybe your children are thinking about something that they want to do post-high school, and you're not familiar with that, but you're connected to a larger community, and maybe you have an opportunity to provide that kind of information to someone else. Internship opportunities, just through like the collective homeschool community, as people know each other and are able to give into that. I think that's a super valuable reason to be connected to the much larger kind of organization.
I think we're very purposeful about how we do support families because we do have our chapters, and each of those chapters is led by a leader who is supported by the organization as well in various ways, training, conflict resolution, regular communication with board members and all of that. And so having that, first of all, that kind of top down and bottom up flowing of information and help and support and accountability really does kind of help everything keep running smoothly, so that when problems do come up, we have a method and a plan and a framework for resolving them.
Yeah, that's a huge thing. It's a great point, Jen. The chapters aren't something unto themselves. Those chapter leaders are under authority of their regional reps. Those regional reps are under authority of the board. And the DeFrancescos and the Snyders are under authority to the board. Yeah. We don't just get to wake up each morning and do whatever it is we want. We're subject to what the board wants. And honestly, the board is supported and elected by those chapter leaders. They're the ones who are the voting members that put that in place. So even the board collectively is accountable to a larger group. The protections built into that are vast. And so there's no like lone wolf organization thing going on around in any of these components. There's a lot of people working collectively together and all standing firmly, on the Word of God and seeking to build service and commitment and stewardship based on what we see in God's Word. And so we all have that ultimate authority, right, that we're accountable to.
Mm. Yeah, so we're a statewide organization with the board and leadership team. We have regional representatives and then local chapters all over the state. Our main focus is furthering the gospel of Jesus Christ, and we do that through home education. And we have several branches of our ministry. We have PIC, supports and services for our struggling learners and special needs students. Mary Fratiani is a wonderful resource and support for those families. We have our legislative team. We're the only statewide organization in New York that's advocating for home education. We have almost $6,000 worth of membership benefits that we're able to offer our members. And then we have the local chapters, but also events that anyone in the state can participate in, like our Homeschool Day at the Capitol. It's coming up this May 4th and 5th. We'd love to have you join, even if you're not a member of Homeschool New York. And also we have a statewide commencement every June. And Rob, you mentioned our sister organization in Connecticut and the legislation that they're battling this morning that we've been praying for. So we belong to the alliance of all of the Christian statewide organizations in the country. So we're able to have our finger on the pulse with legislation here in New York, but also nationally, which is very valuable.
Yeah. And we partner with HSLDA too, and we value their assistance when a strongly worded letter is needed or an attorney showing up somewhere. There's a lot of communication going back and forth between the two organizations to make sure that we are staying on top of problem areas.
Absolutely. Yeah. So how do I become a member?
Well, a couple directions you can take on that. The simplest thing perhaps to do is to go to our website, homeschoolnewyork.org, and there's a Join Now button there, and you can get signed up that way. If you happen to be near or know other homeschoolers or part of our organization, you can also get connected up with that local chapter. They'll end up directing you kind of to the same place, and you become members of the statewide organization. It's a very simple process. They ask you a couple questions, you get your credit card information in there, and you get all set up. And so you're a member of the statewide organization, grabbing all those benefits as Emily was describing. And then you also have the opportunity to then be a member of a local chapter. And there are various activities, and they can be very different. Some are primarily parental support groups. Other ones are much more field trip oriented and kids going out and doing activities together. Some have different kinds of co-ops that meet occasionally or weekly and provide additional kind of educational enrichment opportunities and things like that. So it's kind of find the one that fits your mode.
We have some sports chapters.
Yep, there's a lot of homeschool sports going on, particularly in our central New York regions and stuff like that. So you would not believe how much. It's great. But yeah, so you can kind of access where it fits in, and you can be a member of more than one local chapter as well. That's really not a problem. We even have a virtual chapter that meets online. They use Zoom, and we've got people from all across the state who join together that way. It just fits some folks' schedule better and covers our more scattered remote regions a little bit where people have an opportunity to join that way. But yeah, just go to the website. The link will be popping up here at the end of the video as well, and you can go to the Join Now and get your stuff coming along.
Anyone can do the Join Now, and you'd be an at-large member.
Yep.
Membership in a chapter is at the discretion of the chapter leader. So that's where the regional reps come in and try to be the first point of contact to a new joinee and find out, what it is you're looking for, where you live. Sometimes the best chapter for you is not the one that's down the street, just based on, what they offer or how they meet. And so the regional rep can help walk through that process and put you in touch with the chapter leader, and then you can find out if there are additional requirements. Every chapter is a little bit different in how they function, and some have very stringent requirements for joining, and others are very open. So that would depend on what you're looking for.
Yeah, but that regional rep would follow up with you after you do the Join Now and help you kind of navigate that and find where your best home will be.
Awesome. Well, Rob, Jen, and Dan, thank you so much for joining us this morning as we share a little bit more about who we are and what we do. Is there anything last that you would like to share before we close out for today?
I think it's a pleasure to be able to join together and to share this. We, again, we love the opportunity to serve, and homeschooling is such a great opportunity for folks who are still considering, maybe do we want to try it, do we not want to try it, whatever else like that. take the plunge. Really encourage you. The benefits are tremendous. We could do 6 more podcasts just talking about all the pluses and things that have happened as we've grown through our own homeschooling journeys. You might, if you think you can't, you probably can.
You can.
Just saying, don't sell yourself short. Get in touch with us. We can find folks who can chat with you locally and kind of encourage you in that.
Yeah. And don't be intimidated by the New York State regulations.
Oh, please don't.
I mean, while we would love to see them go away, you still can freely homeschool under them.
Yes, absolutely.
And we're here to help.
Absolutely.
Sure.
All right. Well, thank you so much to you guys and also to our listeners who are joining us today. Don't forget to like and subscribe. And if you have any questions, just comment below or send us a message on our website or on our social media pages. We would be more than glad to continue this conversation with you. For now, let's depart to serve the Lord by loving our families. We'll see you next time on the Homeschool New York podcast.
Bye-bye.
Bye.